Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Benjamin, and welcome back to our look at the history of campaigning here in the United States. And we're going to focus especially on this election because the truth is, up until 1896, campaigning for president, with the exception of the American Civil War, where uh, soldiers were actually allowed to vote for the first time while they were in the field via absentee ballots. Nothing really changed with the campaigning style that had arisen during the Jackson era, where you would have your surrogates hold rallies and give speeches and all that, and you would campaign mostly from your front porch. And William McKinley actually did campaign from his front porch. He didn't really do much. He would give interviews in newspapers, and of course, newspapers were still a massive factor. Nothing much really changed in that regard. What changed was that William Jennings Bryan, the Democratic nominee, as well as the populist nominee, he thought that it would be better for him to crisscross the nation and actually appear in person to voters. And he was really the first presidential candidate to do this. Now, during the previous 100 years, local candidates, of course, did, appear in front of voters. Candidates for state legislatures, for House of Representatives, even occasionally a gubernatorial candidate. Now remember, by the way, the Senate doesn't vote in. The Senate doesn't have a popular vote, direct election. Instead, it's appointed by state legislatures. But anyway, moving back to Jennings Bryan, what we're really looking at is the first time a presidential candidate, top of the ticket candidate, is going out and meeting with voters. And this is considered new. And the reason why it wasn't considered was it really wasn't considered presidential to go out and pander to voters. At least that's the way they would have phrased it. But Bryan, he thought, no, the voters deserve to know who they are voting for and to hear them speak and to hear them explain their positions. Jennings Bryan, for example, he was a great speaker too, so he was also trying to use his greatest ability on the campaign trail. You can actually hear his recorded version. Of course, he was an old man by the time you hear a radio version of it or an audio clip of William Jennings Bryan giving his famous Cross of Gold speech. But he first gave it at the Democratic Convention in 1896 when he was nominated. He would also be nominated a further 2 times. The second thing that William Jennings Bryan did was he started a version that I think today would be called databasing, or the best way or compiling records of voters with their intentions, their position leanings, where they lived, how many people are in their family, what their occupation was. And this would help his campaign, and because he allowed the Democratic Party to actually use these resources, it allowed them to establish very strong ground games in that area in better voter outreach. And nowadays, while he was doing it on, 3x5 cards and keeping them in little boxes, and that's slightly a joke, they didn't have 3x5 cards in 1896, but, he would use, small little sheets of paper that they would store in boxes, and like actual wooden boxes, not like cardboard boxes. Nowadays, that is all digital, And that's a very new phenomenon because, even up to, say, 2000, a lot of records were all paper. And this is why historical records are often very spotty, is because paper doesn't like a lot of things. It doesn't like air. Believe it or not, paper will decay even if it's just in a dry place, like a cool, dry place. There's various things that can eat paper, like molds and mildews. Water damage is, of course, a thing. Fire is a thing. It can be ripped, it can be shredded, it can be torn. Basically, paper is not exactly... It can fail. But still, his ability to use that, and of course the continuation of these, because they would go back to these voters, make sure, okay, you didn't move, okay, you changed your job, or you had another kid, or, and they would use that to pitch their platform specifically to that person's unique life situation in order to try and get their vote. And to a degree, this is still done today, again, through modern methods of digitization, phone calls, etc., etc. Now, obviously, he didn't win the election, so you may be wondering, well, if this was so revolutionary and so beneficial, why are you bringing it up? And the real reason I'm speaking about this is because this is something that has lasted through to today. You don't see presidential candidates campaigning from their front porch, or I guess basements or bunkers in the era of COVID-19. Which is coming to an end in terms of seeing Biden and Trump in their basements. And the reality of that is we find it extremely weird that a presidential candidate isn't going out to speak with voters. We consider it so normal that a presidential candidate goes out to speak with voters in public that when we have a global crisis, we consider it so weird that they're not just soldiering on. I think a lot of people are, on both parties, are thrilled that campaign events are actually going to be starting up again, because in the modern era, your presidential candidate has to be accessible to the voter. Back then, they wanted somebody who would be presidential. And don't get me wrong, William Jennings Bryan was able to get a ton of enthusiasm in states where he won. But his biggest problem was that William McKinley was a much more experienced politician. He had a better campaign apparatus in terms of surrogates, and there was still a bit of a Republican domination stranglehold on the most populous parts of the nation, aka the industrial Midwest and the Northeast. He won. McKinley won, I believe, the 3 or 4 most populous states. He won the 4 most populous states. I think he even won the 5th most populous state too. No, he actually lost Missouri, which is, if I remember correctly, the 5th most populous. Yeah, Missouri is the 5th most populous. Or was the 5th most populous back in 1896. But winning New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Illinois, well, that was pretty much enough if he held on in other Republican strongholds like Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana. and of course carried the east, the northern part of the eastern seaboard in New England, that would have been it. Truthfully, whoops, I'm going to set it to fill just because I don't, I'm trying to make a point here with the map. Okay. See, the reality is New England and the Midwest could basically determine policy of the nation for everyone else. I'm just going to hit refresh on this. There we go. Just to make it easy. And that must meant that probably means there was one state that split its votes. I would bet Maryland. But this was really the turning point in how campaigning was done. And as time went on, you actually did see presidential candidates really embrace the William Jennings Bryan style of campaigning. McKinley, again, ran from his front porch in 1900. Teddy Roosevelt, on the other hand, ooh, boy. You want to talk about somebody who loved to challenge? Yeah, he campaigned across the nation heavily, both in 1908 and eventually 1904, and then eventually in 1912. Taft was more of a McKinley style. Charles Evans Hughes, somewhere in between. But by the time of Harding and the 1920s, you did kind of need your presidential candidate to crisscross the nation and speak with voters. And next time we're actually going to be kind of accelerating this because another change happened fairly quickly by the 1920s that did start impacting elections, as well as views on the presidency itself. And that was radio. Anyway, I want to thank everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see y'all next time. Take it easy. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.